Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a set of source materials that are not just provocative, they're fundamentally challenging.
You really are.
And I want to say this up front. This is dense critical theory, but if you stay focused with us right to the very end, the payoff is huge. It will give you a totally new lens to view, well, to view everything.
That's a good warning because the topic we're exploring, drawn from what the sources call power design theory is,
Yeah,
it can be unsettling.
definitely.
We're tackling the theory's central and, frankly, pretty dark question. Why are idealists, highly motivated, good-intentioned people, why are they often the first to become subordinates? Or, as the theory puts it, slaves in a power structure?
So our mission today is to unpack how the language we usually celebrate, words like love, equality, humanity, is, according to this theory, actually a mechanism for control.
Right. We're trying to pull back this sweet moral facade to see the cold, hard rules of power operating underneath.
Okay, so let's dive in. The theory starts with a really blunt assertion.
It does. It basically says that people whose awareness and consciousness levels are low when it comes to reality,
Okay.
they're the very people most likely to fall for abstract, idealized concepts. Things like equality, care, love, and humanity.
See, right away I have to push back on that. Why? Why would low awareness make you more receptive to concepts we generally think of as noble or, advanced?
It's the immediate psychological reward. These idealized words are, in essence, escape routes.
Escape routes.
Yeah, they offer an illusion, a narrative that feels much sweeter and nobler than the cold, harsh reality. And that reality, the theory says, is defined by words like competition, power, and acquisition.
Those are tough words. They're demanding. They imply risk, effort, and a lot of time failure.
Exactly. The pressure to compete, to fight for influence, to acquire resources, that's exhausting. It's often painful. So if you're struggling in that reality, the idea of a world governed by love is it's intoxicatingly appealing.
It gives you instant moral validation without having to do the heavy lifting.
That's it. So the first big takeaway from power design theory is that these sweet words aren't philosophical goals so much as they are psychological defense mechanisms. They're designed to let you escape a reality you find too difficult to face.
Which brings us to the next layer of the theory, this idea of hiding behind moral superiority.
Right. This is the psychological driver.
The classic high ground maneuver.
Exactly. The theory suggests that idealists, especially those who know maybe deep down, that they lack real-world power or influence. They use this moral framework as a defense.
How so?
They categorize themselves as the good ones, the good people. And this is the critical part. They demonize anyone who operates differently, anyone who's focused on that cold reality of competition.
This is so cynical. Are the sources saying there's no genuine goodness? Or just that the desire for it gets hijacked by this defense mechanism?
The focus is really on the unconscious motivation. It's not that people are consciously faking it. Power design theory claims this happens unconsciously to justify what the sources call their weak existence.
Wow, weak existence. That's harsh.
It is. But the logic is, if you can't win the power game, it's a lot easier on your ego to just define the game itself as evil. And your inability to play it, well, that becomes a sign of your moral purity.
So the moral high ground isn't just a shield, it's also a weapon.
Precisely.
Let's get into the specific examples the theory uses, because this is where it gets painfully clear. How does this show up in something as personal as a relationship?
Okay, so take a relationship where one partner starts to lose dominance. Maybe they're less attractive or not contributing financially. What the theory just calls a loss of power.
Right.
Instead of dealing with that power deficit directly, that person will psychologically repackage their subordination, their helplessness, really as sincerity. And then they frame their partner's power, their attraction, or success as something calculating or cold.
So they're deploying a moral veto. They're saying, I'm not weaker than you, I'm just more authentic. And you're not stronger, you're just morally flawed.
You nailed it. A moral veto. They substitute that moral framework for a practical one. They try to guilt trip the other person into doing what they want.
And does it work?
Not really. No, not in the long run. The partner might feel guilty for a bit, but the underlying power dynamic doesn't change. So the idealist is still subordinate, but now they're also resentful because their sincerity didn't actually get them what they wanted.
I have to admit, hearing weakness packaged as sincerity makes me rethink a few arguments from my past.
It has that effect.
Let's shift to the societal example, the one about wealth.
Yeah, this is a classic application of the theory. It talks about a person who fails to acquire wealth because of what it calls incompetence or just a lack of market success. And facing that, facing your own inability, is psychologically crushing.
So what's the shortcut? What's the escape route here?
It's just much easier and sweeter to bypass that pain.
Mm.
You do it by vilifying the rich as evil and greedy, and then you exalt equality as the highest possible good.
So the ideal of equality becomes the ultimate defense against having to face your own personal failure.
That's the idea. It serves two purposes at once. It shields your ego, and it gives you a socially acceptable weapon to use against the people who succeeded where you failed.
And this is where the theory gets really dark. This is where the ruling class steps in.
Yes. This is where the design part of power design theory begins. Because the rulers, they see this psychological pattern perfectly. They see the idealist's desperate need to feel good, to avoid reality, and their willingness to trade real success for moral status.
So they leverage that vulnerability. They basically hand the idealists the tools for their own self-defense, but the tools are actually chains.
Exactly. The ruling class creates these specific emotionally charged frames, these linguistic traps, that are designed to appeal directly to that need for moral superiority. They know if they wrap the power dynamic in beautiful language, the idealists won't just accept subordination, they'll volunteer for it.
Let's dissect those frames. What are the rhetorical structures they use?
The source gives two really potent examples. The first one sets the moral baseline. We all love and create a non-discriminatory world.
Which immediately frames anyone who disagrees as a hateful bigot.
Right. It puts them outside the moral circle. It's a non-negotiable, feel-good starting point.
And the second one is even more powerful. It really weaponizes idealism.
Yes. Example B is the knockout punch. Your sacrifice and dedication is precisely justice.
Ooh, that is potent. It takes something painful sacrifice and immediately reframes it as the highest moral reward you can get, justice. Why sacrifice for, personal gain when you can sacrifice for righteousness itself?
It completely changes the cost-benefit analysis. The ruler's asking for your time, your money, your power. But they frame it as an act of moral service. And the idealists just eat it up. They enthusiastically comply because it confirms their identity as good people.
So the more beautifully you ask for sacrifice, the more they'll give. They are literally sacrificing their own rights for the satisfaction of being on the good team.
That's the trap. And this brings us to the final point of the theory. The disastrous practical outcome of all this enthusiastic compliance.
Okay, so what are the tangible consequences?
The main one is just willing exploitation. The person operating from a place of sincerity. They willingly give up their possessions, their time, their agency, all in the name of being sincere. They feel moral, but they're being drained.
And what about on the societal level, the person using equality as a shield?
That person gladly obeys and forfeits their own rights, their own ambition, in the name of equality. They accept a system where they are subordinate because the moral payoff feels so much better than the hard, messy work of competing.
So if the idealists are giving everything up, who's getting all the benefits?
Well, the theory is very clear on this. All the benefit returns to the ruler who designed the frame.
Of course.
The ruler gets total control without ever using force. They just offered a beautiful linguistic trap, and the idealists walked right in and handed over their autonomy.
Which leads to the final, terrifying status of the idealist. They're living the life of a dominated subordinate to slave, as the theory says.
And the truly insidious part is the illusion. They are completely unaware that their own thoughts and actions were prompted by this power structure. They genuinely believe they're acting on their own, doing good deeds.
They're practically enslaved while being absolutely convinced that they are morally free.
Exactly.
Wow. This really just highlights the terrifying power of idealistic and abstract language. It's not just rhetoric, it's an operational tool of control.
It's the ultimate mask. The sources call these words the sweetest curtain, designed to cover the cold, hard power dynamics of reality. You're so busy admiring the curtain, you don't see the machinery working behind it.
So if this theory is right, the only way to regain your actual autonomy, the way to avoid becoming that subordinate, involves one very simple but very difficult step.
You have to lift the curtain. You have to be willing to face the real rules of competition and power head on. The whole point of understanding this theory is to stop reacting emotionally to the beautiful frames people present you with and start identifying the power structures underneath. That's how you regain your free will.
We started this deep dive promising it would expand your thinking, and I think we've delivered. If these high-minded concepts, dedication, sincerity, equality, are, according to this theory, just psychological defenses or tools of power, how should you redefine your own approach to competition and influence in your life?
It's a profound question. It's about learning to separate what makes you feel morally comfortable from what is actually effective. It forces you to ask, are my actions about achieving a real goal, or are they just about protecting my ego from a harsh truth? Making that distinction. That's the key to true autonomy.